This month's theme, as you know, is believing our way to greater possibilities. And today's topic is the science of belief. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you the thoughts and the findings of Bruce Lipton from his book, Spontaneous Evolution, and those of Andrew Newberg, a medical doctor specializing in neuroscience. The tagline from Lipton's book is, "Our positive future and a way to get there from here." I'm going to move over so that fan doesn't bother you. My interest in sharing Bruce's material is that there are a number of sections in the book which address spirituality, including a number of pages on New Thought. In his chapter on a new look at the old story, he addresses that statement like this: we can cultivate unity and coherence that will allow us to take an emergent step forward, such that in the near future, the path of evolution once again brings civilization to the powerful midpoint of balanced spirituality and materiality. In the 1980s and 90s, our country began to experience the growth of New Thought spirituality, movements that focused on personal growth. In a society, Bruce wrote, based on the primacy, meaning priority or preference, the primacy of the individual had been on creating one's own personality reality. He realized, though, that part of that New Thought approach was recognizing the reality which had already been collectively created. That is what we New Thought folks call, wait for it, of course, collective consciousness. And in his chapter titled Going Sane, yeah, I said sane, S-A-N-E, sane, Going Sane, he provides his ideas on moving to the next level of human evolution, what he calls sane alternatives to consider. So here's the first one. Move from original sin to original synergy. Now, New Thought folks, we love the word synergy because it means the creation of a whole that is greater than any of the single sum of its parts. The term synergy comes from the Attic Greek word, which means working together. And working together in a sane world, Upton relates, we must shift the focus of religion away from trying to please a conditional cosmic overlord to practicing heaven on earth. Because, he says, heaven is a practice, not a place. His second sane alternative is move from a punishment mode to a learning mode. As we already know, and so does Bruce, the word sin means missing the mark. So this suggests that with practice, humans ought to be able to hit the mark with doing that more often, and then reframing sin, which is much of what resides in our subconscious, stimulating fear, guilt, low self-esteem, incapability. Reframing sin is the beginning of creating compassion for ourselves and for others. It allows us to focus on the consequences of our lessons, take responsibility, and then take better aim. Lipton believes that the evolution of human culture in general and humans individually is primarily a trial and error process. Each step, he writes, is primarily trial and error, and whether we view it as a brilliant breakthrough or a devastating error, it's a mutation along the evolutionary pathway. We move from victims to conscious participants when we learn from our errors and then apply our wisdom to act accordingly. His third sane alternative is move from victim to free and willing participant. Quoting physicist John Wheeler, who was a colleague of Albert Einstein's, Bruce reminds us that humankind's former concept of its role in the world was that there was a universe out there somewhere, and the human, an observer, was safely protected from that universe by a 6-inch slab of plate glass or something like that. But now we've learned from the quantum world that even to observe a minuscule electron, we must shatter that plate glass or whatever block it is between us and the rest of the universe in our minds. Because we are not a universal observer, never will, and now we know it. We are a universal participant. In physics, a quantum, and I used that word a few minutes ago, a quantum is the minimum amount of any physical entity or physical property involved in an interaction. But in spirituality and mysticism, a quantum is a set of metaphysical beliefs and associated practices that seek to relate consciousness, intelligence, spirituality, or mystic worldviews to the ideas of quantum mechanics and its interpretations, which is another way of saying that we create reality through our perceptions. And you'll remember that I talked about perceptions last week, that they have a tremendous influence in shaping our character and experiences. And remember, perceptions come to us from the collective consciousness and from information shared with us, sometimes without its truth being authenticated. Yet they can become our beliefs, not only in our thinking, but even permeating the cells of our bodies. And when this happens, that can undermine our strength, our health, and our desires. So moving from victim to free and willing participant includes recognizing that we are cause to our own effect. And here's the bottom line on this sane alternative, the one I've just discussed. Where collective thoughts assemble, they have the coherence to create a reality. Let me say that again. Where collective thoughts assemble, they have the coherence to create a reality. Now, the fourth sane alternative is to move from separation to connection. Both Bruce Lipton and Greg Braden have looked to practices in Buddhism where this concept is concerned. The Buddhists describe loving participation in the world as compassion and describe that it shows a deep understanding of both quantum physics and cellular biology. One dedicated to awakening heart and mind cultivates the understanding that love of self and love of others are one and the same. And this is seen as unity of life and all living things. Braden discovered that to Buddhists, the freely willing choice of any individual to act in a particular way directly impacts humanity as a whole. And they came to that conclusion a long time ago. So these two men, Braden and Lipton, see technology as an inherent and fundamental element of evolution. But the true wisdom dawning today is the realization that science, devoid of spirit, is limited. We must embrace our individual and collective power in compassion in order to use technology more wisely and with appropriate humility. Science and spirit working together for the good of humankind. Now I'd like to shift gears and talk with you about how science can view the human being in today's world. Dr. Andrew Newberg is a neuroscientist who studies the relationship between brain function and various mental states. He's a pioneer in the neurological study of religious and spiritual experiences, a field known as neurotheology. His research includes taking brain scans of people in prayer, meditation, rituals, and sometimes trance states, in an attempt to better understand the nature of religious and spiritual practices and attitudes. Dr. Newberg has written 10 books related to his research, beginning in 2010 with How God Changes Your Brain, which we've talked about in the past. And then quickly moving on in 2012 when he published a book called Principles of Neurotheology, with emphasis on the neurological intersection between spirituality and health. Neurotheology. Boy, how I wish Dr. Holmes had been around for that one. Wouldn't he have had a good time with that phrase? And as most of you know, Dr. Newberg writes a column on science and spirituality every month in our Science of Mind magazine. In March of this year, his contribution was titled Quantum Physics, Neuroscience, and the Law of Attraction. Boy, he was setting us up for this talk, no question about it. In that article, he shared with us that for millennia, scientific visions have been shaped by religion, and religion has been changed by science. Today, neuroscience continues to transform our concepts of life, the universe, and God by demonstrating how spiritual practices enhance many functions of the brain. The idea, he writes, is that thoughts can somehow influence the universe, and he finds that enticing. So do we. From a Western perspective, God responds to our prayers. And if you combine this with the Eastern notion that consciousness itself is the fundamental basis of the universe, it becomes easy to see how the metaphysical dialogues of the 19th century transformed the religious landscape of America. And you know, after I had written that, I got to thinking, in the 19th century, who might that have been? And so I pulled out my Spirits in Rebellion book, which many of you have seen, some of you even have, and found names like Ralph Waldo Emerson, like Henry David Thoreau. How about Joel Goldsmith? How about Phineas Quimby? And Emma Curtis Hopkins, Mary Baker Eddy, Thomas Troward, people that many of us know a lot about because we've studied their writings. But at the very least, we've heard their names mentioned in talks like this and in conversations with people of like mind. So you see, as you have studied these individuals, you actually have become a part of transforming the religious landscape of America. The concept that thought vibration was the law of attraction in the thought world was introduced by no one less than Ernest Holmes in his writings. He wrote that the direct result of conscious and unconscious thought becomes the direct reason for and cause of that which comes into our lives. Quantum dynamics, says Newberg, cannot offer a scientific explanation, but neuroscience can. Because every person's brain is imbued with a thought and feeling atmosphere shaped by our emotions, our memories, and our imagination. These thoughts can actually change the structure and function of our neurons. Now, this is a neuroscientist saying this. And the brain scan research, which he has done, has documented that prayer and meditation can literally change the way our brains perceive reality. This, he points out, can allow our thoughts to change, our actions, behaviors, and relationships to others. Listen to this quote from Ernest Holmes. "The most destructive force you and I have is our own unconscious emotional thinking and feeling state." And neuroscience agrees. Negative emotions easily undermine our potential intentions and goals. So here's Dr. Newberg's advice. Don't give in to them. Instead, observe them without judgment and ask yourself 3 simple questions when or if that's happening. Number 1, how do these values make me feel? Number 2, is there any value to them? And then number 3, how do my negative emotions affect others? Newberg says he supports Holmes' model of attraction of having an optimistic view to attract positive, loving, compassionate people and ideas into our lives. When we practice kindness, compassion, and inner peacefulness, we lower our neurological fear and self-doubt. We build new neural circuits that support us in creating meaningful relationships and sharing positive ideas. This is the neurological law of attraction that can transcend our old beliefs and build a better world using science, spirituality, and compassion. We can cultivate unity and coherence that will allow us to take an emergent step forward, such that in the near future, the path of evolution once again brings civilization to the powerful midpoint of balanced spirituality and materiality, believing our way to greater possibilities through the science of belief. And so it is.